Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Jack Storm, and this is The World Today, only on L Radio Phoenix Today. The world is watching the Middle East as the United States prepares another major economic offensive against Iran. Global markets are reacting. Oil remains a major concern. Washington and Ottawa are heading toward a new trade confrontation. And across Latin America, governments are dealing with security, economic, and political pressure. We'll also take you into the Caribbean and finish with the latest from the world of sports. These are the stories you need to know. Let's get started. Top story: U.S. prepares new economic offensive against Iran. The United States is preparing what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has described as an enormous new economic campaign against Iran. The administration is expected to announce additional sanctions targeting Iran's economic lifelines and businesses involved in supporting Iranian trade. The announcement comes as the situation surrounding the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the biggest concerns for the global economy. Iran has warned that ships that don't comply with its requirements for passage through the waterway could face fines or seizure. That raises the possibility of further disruption to commercial shipping through one of the world's most important energy corridors. China is now calling the situation a critical juncture and urging the countries involved to return to negotiations. China's foreign minister said Monday that the region needs dialogue and a reduction in tensions. And here's why everyone should care. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographic location on a map. It is an economic artery. If oil shipments are restricted for an extended period, the consequences could reach virtually every major economy. Higher energy costs can mean higher transportation costs. Higher transportation costs can mean higher prices. And higher prices can make it harder for central banks to lower interest rates. So this morning, the Middle East is also an economic story. Money and markets. Wall Street starts the week on edge. Now to your money. Global financial markets started Monday under pressure as investors waited for details of the new U.S. sanctions against Iran. Oil prices actually moved lower today after last week's gains, with investors taking some profits. But analysts aren't calling the energy threat over. Brent crude remains around the low $-90 range, while U.S. crude is in the mid-$80s. Gold continues to attract investors looking for protection against uncertainty. And U.S. Treasury yields remain elevated, creating another headache for policymakers and consumers. The 10-year Treasury yield was around 4.7%, while the 30-year yield remained near levels not seen in many years. For Americans, those numbers matter because Treasury yields influence borrowing costs throughout the economy: mortgages, auto loans, business loans, credit, and eventually consumer spending. Investors are also looking ahead to NVIDIA's upcoming earnings report, which could have a major impact on technology stocks and the broader market. And later this week, attention turns to the Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole meeting. Wall Street wants to know, where are interest rates going next? Washington. Trump administration faces multiple battlegrounds. President Donald Trump is entering another politically significant week with several major issues competing for attention: the Iran conflict, immigration, trade, and the economy. The administration continues to defend its aggressive immigration policies while federal courts challenge portions of those policies. Last week, a federal judge struck down the administration's suspension of immigrant visa processing affecting applicants from 75 countries. The case is expected to continue through the courts. At the same time, the administration is escalating its economic pressure campaign against Iran. And then there's trade. U.S. and Canada trade war heats up. The relationship between Washington and Ottawa is becoming increasingly tense. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced dollar-for-dollar retaliation against U.S. tariffs following the collapse of trade negotiations. Canada says it will impose new tariffs on American products beginning September 8th. The United States already has 50% tariffs affecting roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian imports. The Canadian dollar weakened Monday as investors reacted to the escalation. This is important because the United States and Canada aren't minor trading partners. They are deeply connected economically. Cars cross the border, energy crosses the border, food crosses the border, manufacturing supply chains cross the border. So a prolonged trade fight could create additional costs for companies and consumers on both sides. Latin America, U.S. expands war on drug trafficking. Now let's turn to Latin America. The United States is expanding its military campaign against suspected drug trafficking organizations. The Trump administration has been conducting strikes against suspected drug smuggling vessels in waters around Latin America. Now Washington is pursuing expanded cooperation with countries including Colombia, Ecuador, and Honduras to conduct operations against criminal organizations on land. The policy is controversial. Supporters say stronger military action is necessary to confront powerful drug trafficking organizations. Critics warn that putting American forces into Latin American countries could create serious questions about sovereignty and the possibility of civilian casualties. The United States has labeled multiple criminal organizations in the region as terrorist organizations. This is becoming one of the most consequential shifts in U.S.-Latin American relations in decades. And for countries already struggling with organized crime, this is a very complicated issue. Brazil presidential election takes center stage. Brazil's presidential election remains one of the biggest political stories in Latin America. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is campaigning for another term, while Flávio Bolsonaro represents the political movement associated with his father, former President Jair Bolsonaro. Brazil's election is being closely watched outside the country because Brazil is Latin America's largest economy. The outcome could influence trade with the United States, relations with China, energy policy, government spending, and Brazil's role in regional politics. The campaign is expected to become increasingly intense as the October election approaches. For investors, businesses, and governments across the Americas, Brazil's political direction matters. Mexico border, cartels, and U.S. pressure. Mexico remains caught between two major challenges: migration and organized crime. Washington wants stronger action against drug trafficking organizations. Mexico has repeatedly emphasized its national sovereignty and the need for cooperation rather than unilateral American military action. Meanwhile, migration patterns across Mexico continue to change as U.S. immigration policies become more restrictive. For President Claudia Sheinbaum, maintaining the relationship with Washington while protecting Mexico's sovereignty is becoming an increasingly difficult balancing act. And the economic relationship is just as important. The United States remains Mexico's largest trading partner, so politics, immigration, and trade are all tied together. The Caribbean. Haiti remains a major security challenge. In the Caribbean, Haiti remains one of the region's most serious humanitarian and security crises. Criminal gangs continue to control large areas of the country, while the government and security forces struggle to restore order. The situation is also affecting migration throughout the Caribbean and toward the United States. And for Florida, Haiti is particularly important. South Florida has one of the largest Haitian communities in the United States, meaning developments in Haiti have a direct connection to communities here. The international community continues looking for ways to strengthen Haitian security forces and restore basic government services. But the road ahead remains extremely difficult. Cuba economic pressure continues. Cuba continues to face severe economic difficulties. The island has experienced persistent energy problems, shortages, and rising costs. The country's economic relationship with the United States remains a major factor, particularly surrounding energy supplies and sanctions. For Cuban families, however, the debate isn't primarily about Washington or Havana. It's about everyday life, electricity, food, transportation, medicine, and the ability to make ends meet. Cuba's economic situation remains one of the major stories to watch in the Caribbean. Europe, Ukraine war continues. In Europe, the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Ukraine is warning that Russia could expand its military mobilization, while Russia says Ukrainian attacks against economic infrastructure will bring retaliation. The war remains one of the biggest tests of Western military and economic support. European governments are also under pressure to strengthen their own defenses. And with the United States involved in multiple international crises, European leaders are increasingly discussing how much responsibility Europe itself should take for its security. For now, there is still no clear path to a lasting peace agreement. Sports, Premier League shocks. Now, let's get to sports. The Premier League is back and already producing surprises. Hull City shocked Manchester United 2-0 in its return to the Premier League after 9 years away. It was Hull's first league victory over Manchester United in 52 years. And Tottenham Hotspur had a miserable opening weekend, losing 3-0 to Brentford, despite spending more than £300 million during the summer transfer window. Liverpool also produced late drama Sunday. Newcastle led twice, but Liverpool fought back to earn a 2-2 draw, with Dominic Szoboszlai converting a penalty in the 9th minute of stoppage time. And Manchester City began life after Pep Guardiola with a 2-1 victory over Bournemouth. The new Premier League season is already giving fans plenty to talk about. NFL. Preseason heating up. Here in the United States, the NFL preseason is moving toward its final stages. The Tennessee Titans defeated the Seattle Seahawks 19-16 after coming back from a 13-point deficit. Tennessee scored 16 unanswered points in the comeback. Seattle falls to 0-2 in the preseason, while Tennessee improves to 2-0. And while preseason games don't count toward the regular season standings, these games matter enormously for players fighting for roster spots. For coaches, the evaluation period is running out. For players on the bubble, every snap matters. #MLB. The playoff race is taking shape. Major League Baseball is moving toward the final stretch of the regular season. The New York Yankees defeated Toronto 8-3 Sunday, while Tampa Bay defeated Baltimore 3-1. The Philadelphia Phillies also defeated St. Louis 6-4. With the postseason approaching, every series becomes more important. Teams aren't just trying to win games anymore, they're trying to position themselves for October. The big picture. So what should we be watching today? 5 things. Number 1, Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Number 2, oil and inflation. Number 3, the growing U.S.-Canada trade confrontation. Number 4, the expanding American campaign against organized crime in Latin America. And number 5, the political and economic direction of Brazil and the wider region. These stories may seem separate. They're not. Energy affects inflation. Inflation affects interest rates. Interest rates affect markets. Trade affects prices. Politics affects trade. And international conflicts can affect all of them. That's why the headlines matter. The world keeps turning. The headlines keep coming. The biggest stories today aren't happening in isolation. They're connected. What happens in the Middle East can affect your wallet here at home. What happens in Washington can affect markets around the world. What happens in Latin America can affect America's security and economy. And what happens in the Caribbean can have a very real impact right here in Florida. So don't just watch the headlines, understand them. This is The World Today, and you're listening to L Radio Phoenix. Your music, your community, your world. Stay informed, stay curious. The world keeps turning. The headlines keep coming. And I'm Jack Storm, and this is Our World.